Hey, KU fans, welcome back to KU Sports Extra. I'm Matt Tate. This right here is Tom Keegan. You know him as the predictor. Well, okay, maybe you don't. You know him as Tom Keegan, though, and we don't actually have anything to predict. So
although on a KU Sports Extra, I picked Michigan State to go to the Final Four.
You did.
Then I filled out my bracket, and then right before the tournament started, I changed it
to Villanova, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, tough.
So I'm bragging about something I didn't have the
You've
conviction to stick with.
The Sparty colors, a little green there today.
Yeah.
And I've got Wisconsin. It's an all Big Ten final here on KU Sports Extra, which means undoubtedly it will be Kentucky versus Duke.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump into the good news for KU. And it's real simple this week. The good news for Kansas, and specifically for Kansas basketball, is this season, as up and down as it was, as rough as it was in some parts, made it crystal clear what Bill Self needs to do. That's find another big man, and he's been on the warpath looking for one of those guys since the season ended. He's been in the the living room of Mike Thorne Jr., the transfer from Charlotte, 6'10". Decent chance he comes here.
Graduate.
Why wouldn't you? Yeah, he'll be able to play immediately.
When Bill Self is in a living room, that's good news for Kansas basketball
Definitely.
fans. How do you say no to the guy?
Right, and what the big guys have done here, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a very easy thing to think about. And then, of course, the young guys, Steven Zimmerman out of Vegas, a 7-footer. Thon Maker, thanks, Shay, out of
For the pronunciation.
yeah, you know, another 7-footer out of high school. I mean, those guys are big-time prospects, guys that would obviously help this team and, of course, fill a need, too. So good news that he tracked down not only what he needs, but he's going after him.
Yeah, and they obviously need that at both ends of the floor. Although I like Hunter Mickelson, I'm not quite sure why he didn't play more, but maybe he could be a backup next year. He and Lucas could be the backups.
That's exactly right. I mean, both of those guys had good moments this year, and I thought Landon Lucas probably overachieved. He was really good for what anybody expected.
The boards.
Yeah, but I think he fits perfectly into an experienced veteran backup role. He would be perfect in that spot. So what's the bad news?
The bad news is that in KU football at the moment, there are really only two healthy players who you could call linebackers.
When you say who you could call linebackers.
Right.
Yeah.
One of them is Courtney Arnick. He's an undersized linebacker,
Exactly.
but he's played well for him in the past, and this will be his senior year. And there's reason to believe he'll play well again.
Had a really good year last year.
Yeah, he did.
Underrated, I would say.
And the other is Kyron Watson, who is kind of undersized, but also is very slow at the moment.
Yeah.
He's supersized yet undersized. Looks like he needs to get in better shape. Not real fast even when he's in good shape because you've got Jake Love, who has had some concussion issues, Joe Deneen coming back from a shoulder. In his history, he's had concussion issues pre-KU.
Skylar Miles with leg injury, knee injury.
Skylar Miles with the knee injury, bone on bone basically probably. And so he's participating some, but I don't think once the contact starts you'll see him participating. So very, very thin at linebacker for KU. Dangerously thin with not a lot of prospects at getting a lot better there.
Yeah, it seems like a position where, you know, last year they were looking to move guys to running back because of how thin that got. Seems like they'll be desperately looking for anybody that could fill in at linebacker, especially when you consider the class that's coming in, the freshmen. There's only one linebacker in that class, too. So it's going to be interesting. I think Osaz Ogbebor is the lone linebacker in that class, and he'll be a true freshman. I mean, that's a lot to throw on him. Thank you. But, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Osaz Ogbebor?
Yeah, not bad. That was really good, actually. It's not as good as your favorite.
Sviatoslav Mihailuk.
Nailed it every time. All right, well, let's stick with football. We don't have, statistically speaking, we don't have any predictions to make, really, so we're going to just try to change this up here for the off season and keep it fresh. Let's jump into a little football update. We've been out to 3 of the 4 spring practices and got to stay. Well, we've been to 4, but we got to stay for 3 in their entirety. What's jumped out at you the most? I know we talked about the first days of spring, but now that you've seen it over and over here a little bit, what kind of stands out?
Well, a few things. One is that the linebacker crew is very thin. Wide receiver is a very thin position right now in an offense that is going to use 8 or 10 guys a game sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a concern there.
The bodies are there. It's just the depth,
experience.
the quality, the experience. We don't know the answer.
Well, I wrote about last week that they have I don't know how many about 100 yards returning and receptions. And but anyways, but on the positive side, I think they have two guys who can get after the quarterback.
Yes.
And that is Anthony Alobia, who looks really quick off the line of scrimmage, and so does Damani Mosby.
Yep.
Both of them could develop into guys who could harass the quarterback. In the middle, though, they're very, very young, and that could be a concern because they're not real big and not experienced at all. And that's a position where you get better every year because you just add to your body.
Sure.
As your body gets bigger, stronger, better endurance, that's so valuable. Just like offensive line, the years build the body. So, but I do think that those two guys could really make an impact in chasing quarterbacks, which at Kansas in recent years has been a problem.
Yeah, Clint Bowen called the DNs by far the most advanced of the group on defense, and he called the D tackles the babies of the group. They've got a lot to learn. They're very green, so you hit it on the head there. I talked with Rob Likens about just the offensive installation, and he kind of did one of these things, shook his head down a little bit, and he's having fun with it. He's a great dude, but he called it a roller coaster. He said it's been really up and down, and the reason it's been up and down, and I asked him to kind of elaborate, he said, I have a picture in my mind of what this offense is, what it can be, what it should look like. And because we're so young and because we're so new with this offense and installing it here, I haven't seen that picture yet. And I understand that, and I'm willing to give these kids time to learn it, but it's frustrating for me because I've seen it. And it was real interesting. He talked about installing this offense at two other schools prior to Kansas. One, he said it took until the 7th game of their first year before he looked at it and said, okay, we got it. And the other, he said it clicked in the first half of the first game at that school. But then he said it dipped off and didn't actually click again until the next season. So, again, keep those expectations very low, very realistic for what this team will be this year, because there's so many questions and there's so much that's new to these guys, to these coaches, to these players.
College football is new to a lot of these players, relatively new. Then to change systems again, that's starting from scratch even for the veteran players. Then to have such a lack of depth at almost every position, those factors all combine to almost making this like a double-A team playing in the major leagues. So when you watch a double-A team, let's say they're playing an exhibition against the major league team, what do? You look and you try to put a scout's cap on to make it enjoyable, and you try to guess who's going to develop into a player down the road a couple of years from now when they're ready for the big leagues. And that's going to be the only way to enjoy watching Kansas football games this year, because on paper, this team should go 0-12.
Very possible.
On paper.
Very possible.
Now, you got to believe that they'll steal a win somewhere, but you got to be realistic. That's what we're dealing with here in this football team when you look at it.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great analogy. A lot of Royals fans also cross over to KU fans. They know very well what that's like. That team that made it to the World Series last year was full of guys that they were looking at in AAA, AA, and thinking about one day. And the Cubs are doing that now, so it's a great way to put it. Let's move over to basketball and do a quick basketball update. Oubre, bad move, good move? What do you think? How do you wrap that up when you're thinking about him jumping to the NBA right now?
Well, it's not a surprising move. That's my first. When you have been told by credible people that you're a first-round pick, that means you're going to get guaranteed money for 2 years and then 2 years at the club's option, and that's millions. And how do you turn down millions? I wouldn't have the discipline to do it. I'd be worried I was going to get hurt and blow that opportunity at millions.
It's not as hard as you'd think. I mean, I've had money thrown at me for a number of different reasons.
Male modeling contracts.
All kinds of different things, right.
Yeah.
And,
Shaka Smart lookalike contest winning money.
Right. What it came down to.
But you can't accept because then you wouldn't be an amateur anymore.
I need to keep my status. What it came down to for me was, you know what, I'd just rather make $8.12 an hour. I just would. So I stuck it out here, and look, things are going pretty well for me.
My first stop will be to HR to make sure that you are making $8.12 an hour. Thanks for sacrificing that money that Kelly Oubre couldn't sacrifice.
Gosh darn it, Oubre. Anyway.
But I guess they say it'll be a lottery pick. I don't see it. And it's not about whether a guy's ready. None of these guys are ready.
No.
If they're ready to give you guaranteed money, you're ready to go.
Great point.
I don't think Cliff Alexander, anybody credible, is telling him that he's a guaranteed first-round pick. If the NCAA restores his eligibility, I'd stay if I were him. I don't expect that to happen, though, because there are pressures from outside to go as fast as possible, even if that's not the long-range play.
Plus, that thing just became such a mess. I mean, Cliff comes back into the fold, and what's his role? What are the expectations
Would he
for
be
him?
Suspended for the first semester?
There's all kinds of stuff that just make it seem like the right time for a clean break for both sides involved. So, we'll see. I'm with you. I don't expect Cliff back either. That means Cliff's gone, Oubre's gone. Still no official word on Perry Ellis, but I got to think he's coming back. I mean, I could be wrong there. But
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think he's coming back. He's coming off an injury. He was just playing great, the best basketball player of his career. And then he gets injured. A full senior year with him playing the way he was and better
would be really cool.
Would be cool.
Yeah, I think so too. And let's face it, it depends on those guys we mentioned. Zimmerman, Maker, some of the other guys, Malik Newman. I mean, some of those guys.
Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, Diallo. I mean, if KU can find a way to get 3-4 of those guys to commit, guarantee Bill Self's going to find 3 or 4 spots for those guys. That's just how it works.
Yeah, it is how it works.
Yeah, and that's how it should work. I mean, go get the best guys and roll your best team out there. Real quick, we hinted at the Big Ten thing. Who do you think is going to make it to the championship game Monday night? What are your feelings for the Final Four? I think it's a fantastic Final Four. I love it. I think it's awesome when 4 powerhouse teams, 4 powerhouse coaches are there. It's really cool. So who do you have?
It is interesting. I'll go with the chalk. Kentucky.
Whoa.
That was the Carlton Bragg in reverse. Kentucky and Duke. It was interesting that we saw 3 of the 4 teams.
Yeah.
Those of us who traveled to Indy and covered the Champions Classic at the beginning of the year saw 3 of these 4 teams, all but Kansas. So this is a rematch of that game for Duke and Michigan State. And what was kind of neat about that is it felt like Duke was really dominating. Then you look and the score's kind of close. So they're really good, Michigan State, at hanging around. But Duke's freshmen, Winston and Tyus Jones and Okafor have a full year of playing time. And Quinn Cook is just such a great senior leader, a terrific player himself. I just can't see Duke losing to Michigan State.
It's a great team. That's a great Duke team. I didn't watch them a ton this year, but watching them in the tournament, really impressed.
Yeah.
I love Wisconsin. I do. I give them more than a fair chance to take down Kentucky. I don't know that I would pick it. I don't know that I would bet $8.12 on it. But I do give them a real chance. I think that game will be awesome. I wish that was the national championship game. That would be cool. But
it would be.
Kentucky-Duke would be a fine championship game, too.
And Wisconsin-Duke would be an unbelievable semifinal.
Good point. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, all right, well, let's finish it off like we always do. The most obnoxious man in sports. You've got a good one, a guy dear to your heart, I believe, right?
Yeah, and first I'll say that this guy I'm picking this week is not interested in the women's basketball opening at Kansas. That's been confirmed. He's not interested. Gino Auriemma of UConn came out, who's great at generating headlines. You got to love Gino Auriemma. He came out and said that the men's college basketball game is a, quote, a joke. And he went on to say it's so far behind the times, it's unbelievable. And then he had some good points. He said you see 2 guys fighting for the ball and throwing up shots, and 6 of the 10 miss, and they're just in a scrum fighting for the ball. Made some good points and said that only 10 of the 25 teams are worth watching. It's tougher to watch now. It's not in a great place, but if 10 teams in the country are worth watching, that puts the men's game probably 6 ahead of the women's game, which 4 teams were worth watching, and those 4 would just walk through the tournament, because that's always the way it is in the women's game. Is the number 1 seed gets to the to the finals. But they are scoring more points in the women's game,
right,
I think.
Right,
and
right.
So
a little more open style of play, too.
Yeah. Now, I would like to hear him suggest rule changes if he's going to go that far.
Careful with that. You've gotten in trouble for those in the past.
Oh, well, no, he actually, Matt's referring to when I wrote a column saying that the women's game should lower the hoop to 9 feet. About a year later, Gino Auriemma came out and said they should lower it to 9'6", I think he said.
I don't hate it.
But I don't hate that at all. But if he's going to criticize the men's game, and there's some valid criticism there, how about he's great basketball mind?
Right.
Suggest some rule changes
right.
that would bring more offense out in the men's game.
Yeah, otherwise you're just being...
generating headlines, which we love.
Or being obnoxious.
Being obnoxious, yes. Thank you for the help.
There you go, no problem. I'm going to stick with college basketball myself. I'm going to go with Notre Dame coach Mike Brey. I love Mike Brey. I think he's a great coach. I'm a big fan of everything he's done. I loved that game that Notre Dame played against Kentucky. But for the love of all that's right, double team Karl Anthony Towns one time in that second half. And I think he did, and I think it led to an open three in the corner. So he's probably smarter than me. But Towns looked like a man, like a high school kid playing against third graders in that second half.
That's why he was my first team All-American ballot. I had him on it.
I don't blame you. He was 9 for 9 in the last 12 minutes of the game. Really, in a game, Kentucky struggled to score, too. I mean, they needed everything he got, and it was just so easy. He was in slow motion. He was just dropping it in the bucket. I would have loved to see Brey figure something else out to make it harder on him. That's probably a little ruthless, calling it obnoxious, but
Notre Dame,
they were right there.
Great team,
right
Notre
there.
Dame. They beat North Carolina twice and Duke twice. There's no way that Notre Dame should not have gotten a number 2 seed in the tournament.
That was very clear. I mean, both Kentucky and Notre Dame were far better than Kansas pretty much at any time this season. So it worked out right. I think the tournament's been fantastic, start to finish. There's been some really good games.
I think that every year, but I do think it's been fantastic.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's all we've got. I didn't get Gary Bedore's picks on the Final Four. Again, he's kind of disappeared. I mean, I don't know. He might have been sleeping for 3 or 4 days just because that tournament is just so intensive for him.
He's been in here. I saw him in here late. He was here till past midnight last night.
Tracking recruiting.
Yep. So he's busy doing that, and I think that he probably thinks this is a little too frivolous for
a
his
guy
time.
of his. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
we'll see what we can do.
Understandable. I mean, maybe May is our best shot. You get through recruiting in April and all that.
I got to tell you, it's not going to be any easier thanks to Chris Lazzarino of the Alumni magazine. The Alumni Association magazine did an outstanding feature on him. There's a great picture in there.
Kind of shows you what we're working with.
Yeah, it kind of shows you his popularity, his fame, and guys like that can be hard to reach.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep trying.
We will.
That's
that
all
much we can promise.
Thanks for checking out this episode of KU Sports Extra. We'll see you next week with all kinds of new news. You know it's coming. Take care.